Morning Live. Now, the South African Reconciliation Barometer Survey 2019 report concluded conducted by the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation has acknowledged that the SABC is the most trusted public institution, at least one of them in South Africa. Now, the survey was about a range of issues in relation to reconciliation in our country, and those interviewed acknowledged that the institution's wide-ranging and diverse content, but also the SABC's commitment to providing credible, authentic programming was key. And Stanley Henkeman, the Executive Director of the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, joins us now from our Seapoint studios in Cape Town. Stanley, thanks so much for speaking to us here on Morning Live, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sakina. Wonderful to be on Morning Live.
Now, just to put it out there, this was, of course, not solely about the SABC per se or media, but about a range of issues in relation to reconciliation in South Africa. So just in terms of the overarching question that was asked in the survey, what were you pulsing from the public?
So, Sakina, a number of issues are highlighted and questions asked around them. This question around trust in institutions is part of the theme on democratic political culture, but we also ask questions about power relations, racial reconciliation, how much progress have we made in terms of reconciliation, and people's perceptions of change. So it's a range of topics, and it's quite interesting that for the third consecutive survey, now this survey is done every 2 years, but for the third consecutive survey, the SABC is classified by people as their most trusted institution. Now, it's a public perception survey, sampled with 2,400 people across the country, representing the cross-section of society. And so that's quite interesting. And of course, it gives you a sense also of what is happening in our society, because there's a lot of movement between different institutions, depending on what happens with that institution or within those institutions.
And seeing as you speak about the public's trust in the SABC, and you said you do this survey every 2 years. Now, in 2017, the SABC was leading at 50.7%, and now still leading, but this time at 57%. So what has changed? Is the sample, does it show that the public's trust has grown in the institution, or are you able to dissect that for us a little further?
So, Sakina, I think the one thing we need to understand is that 2017 was a difficult year for South Africa, a horrible year. In fact, most institutions have lost a lot of favor with the general public. And so we see in 2019 that all institutions have gone up. The biggest increase in trust has actually been in the president. But the SABC has gone up more than 7%. So, and I think that there might be a number of reasons for it. One, I would say, is that the SABC is probably the most accessible source of information for the majority of South Africans. It's the one broadcast media that reaches everybody in their own language, where they are, whether it's radio, television. But it's also the affordability aspect, because it costs a lot of money to access other sources of news. And so I think those two things are really important: affordability, but also accessibility of the SABC.
So people may want to know, how reliable is this particular survey? How scientific is it? And how many people actually make up your sample?
I think that's a fair question. So the sample is 2,400 adult South Africans over the age of 18. And it is a sample that is randomized. It means that every South African has the potential or possibility to be interviewed, and we corroborate the survey stats or the sample with Stats SA. That's the one thing. So from a survey point of view, that is a good sample to use. But the other thing is that it is also trusted because it is the oldest reconciliation barometer in the world. We have been running this barometer since 2003. And subsequent to that, other countries have followed suit. So it is a barometer that has been around for a long time. And I think we also have to say that if you are quoted in universities, if in the 25-year review, some of the information from the Reconciliation Barometer is cited, then it is reliable. And so we are quite confident that it is a reliable survey.
Stanley, what sort of instruments were used to measure people's opinions and attitudes?
So it's a face-to-face interview across the country, and the interview is done in people's language of choice. So in order to ensure that there's no misunderstanding of the question, and so every single person who gets interviewed gets interviewed in his or her mother tongue. And we make absolutely sure that we have a good cross-section of South African society. So every conceivable group that you can identify in the country would be included in the survey. So it's male, female, youth, and older people, rural, urban. It also has to do with the living standards measurement, the income, and so forth, race, and so it's a wide range of potential groupings.
But what is the bigger picture with regard to this information that you gather?
So essentially what we're trying to do is to ask the question, how much progress are we making in South Africa around reconciliation, because that obviously is the focus, but also has things become different for people? Have things improved for people? And I think, as I said earlier, it is a mixed bag. It depends on where we are in the country. Just to give you a practical example, this year, when we asked the question, how many people believe in that reconciliation is important, you have a percentage of over 70% of people, 77 point something percent of people said reconciliation is important. But when you ask the subsequent question, how many people experienced reconciliation, it comes down to 51.1%. And so that's a good way to see whether what we say or what we would like, whether that matches with the reality on the ground. So we ask people about their standard of living, whether they feel that they're better off, whether they think that relationships between different race groups have improved. And so it's a range of questions we ask. And you can imagine this was round 16. This was the 16th survey. You can imagine the kind of comparisons we are able to strike and draw between the different barometers over the years. And so it gives us a snapshot of where we are as a country in relation to where we were. Now, having said that, I must say, Sakina, that we have gone back as a country in terms of people's perceptions. If you compare, for instance, key institutions like national government, provincial government, local government, between 2006 and 2019, there has been a massive decrease in all of those institutions, which tells you that people's confidence in institutions is actually going down. And so while 2019 is better than 2017, it still doesn't compare with what it was in the earlier years. And so we do have, and so it's good for government, for instance, to understand what people think, but it's also good for other institutions like SAPS, like SARS. Just to give you another example, revenue services at one point was quite high, one of the highest trusted institutions. It has gone down in 2017. It has now gone up in 2019 because it is the third highest or third best trusted institution behind the presidency and the SABC.
Wow, and that's great to know, but just as well that this survey obviously used a qualitative approach, because I wanted you to expand just a little bit more on some of the responses that were given and the sort of things that people are saying when they talk, for example, about the South African Police Service. What are they saying about an institution such as that?
So while it's a quantitative survey, you ask the question to test the level of confidence. Obviously, that needs to be followed up with qualitative information. But essentially what it says is that the South African Police Services, believe it or not, since 2013, had actually improved. 2013, they were one of the lowest trusted institutions, but one can understand that because in 2012 you had Marikana. And so this survey also is a good gauge of what happened in the country and what people think about what happened. And for instance, the biggest impediment in 2019 to reconciliation is corruption. And you can understand why, because it's in the news, it's in people's faces. And so the police still, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Marikana, post-Marikana was the absolute low point for them, but they still, not over in the early 40% or so.
Well, very interesting. Thank you so much, Stanley Henkeman, the Executive Director of the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, talking to us about the 2019 South African Reconciliation Barometer survey, which revealed that the public perceives the SABC as the second most trusted public institution in South Africa. Let's take a break.